Welcome to The Explainer. There are some topics in aviation that are just non-negotiable. You have to know them inside and out. And today, we're tackling one of the big ones, aircraft icing. It can be super subtle, it can happen fast, and honestly, understanding it is absolutely critical for safe flight. So let's get this pre-flight check done and dive right in. I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, right? You look at a powerful airplane and then you think about a tiny, thin layer of frost. How could that possibly be one of aviation's biggest dangers? It just doesn't seem to add up. But trust me, it is. And we're going to break down exactly why. The threat is very, very real, and it all comes down to aerodynamics. So, to get our heads around this, we need a good flight plan. We're going to start with the science of how ice actually forms. Then we'll look at the different kinds you might run into. We'll figure out exactly how it messes with the aircraft. And finally, we'll cover how you can fight back. Here's a quick look at our route for today. We'll start with the anatomy of an ice cloud, then move to the 4 phases of icing, see what happens when ice attacks, learn how to fight back, and then we'll wrap it all up with a quick knowledge check. Ready? Let's get airborne. Okay, first things first. If you're going to defeat an enemy, you have to understand it. So where does all this ice even come from? Well, the answer is hiding inside clouds, and it's based on this really strange, almost magical-sounding phenomenon. The main culprit here is something called a supercooled water droplet, or SUWD for short. And this is where science gets kind of weird. This is liquid water that's hanging out at temperatures way below freezing. I'm talking -10, -20 degrees, or even colder. It's basically just desperate to freeze, but it needs something to grab onto, a freezing nucleus. Okay, so what happens when your airplane becomes that trigger? Well, first, that supercooled droplet smacks into the surface of the wing. That impact is the catalyst. It's what kicks off the whole process. Now, as it starts to freeze, it actually releases this little burst of energy. Think of it like one of those chemical hand warmer packets you shake up. We call this latent heat, and it means only a tiny piece of the droplet freezes right away. The rest of that freezing water then flows back over the surface before it finally freezes solid. And that's how you get that nasty, layered buildup of ice. So now that we know how ice is born, let's meet the different family members. Because, not all ice is created equal. As a pilot, you've got to be able to tell the difference, because some types are way, way more dangerous than others. We're going to look at 4 main types, and we'll go in order of how serious they are. We'll start with hoarfrost, the kind you might see on the ground. Then we'll get into rime ice, clear ice, and the really nasty stuff, rain ice. Let's put the 2 most common in-flight types side by side. Rime and clear ice. Rime ice comes from tiny little droplets in really cold temperatures. It looks milky white and it's pretty brittle. But clear ice, that's a different story. It forms from large droplets when it's just below freezing, so it has time to flow back and freeze into a solid sheet. It's see-through, it's incredibly heavy, and it sticks to the wing like superglue. The big takeaway here? Clear ice is the real heavyweight champion of threats. And this right here leads us to what is an absolute, unbreakable golden rule in aviation. Even a paper-thin layer of hoarfrost, which looks totally harmless, can completely mess up the airflow over the wing. This quote from the manual says it all, loud and clear. There are 0 exceptions. It's got to be a clean aircraft every single time. Okay, so we figured out what ice is. Now let's get into what it does. This is about how it wages a direct assault on your aircraft's basic ability to fly. And we're not just talking about adding a little weight here. This is a fundamental attack on its aerodynamics. So the attack comes from 2 directions. First, you've got the aerodynamics. And get this, a layer of ice no thicker than a piece of sandpaper can slash your lift by 30% and crank up the drag by a whopping 40%. Your wing just stops working the way it's supposed to. It'll stall at a much higher speed and a lower angle of attack. And if that wasn't bad enough, you've also got the system effects. We're talking about the sheer weight of the ice, the risk of it jamming your flaps or ailerons, blocking your airspeed indicator. It can even cause an engine to fail. It's really an all-out assault on the aircraft. Now take a look at this temperature range for turbine engine icing. You might be a little surprised to see it starts at +3 degrees Celsius. How is that even possible? Well, it's because the pressure drop happening right inside the engine intake acts like a refrigerator, cooling the air really, really fast. And that means your engine can literally be making ice even when the outside air temperature is above freezing. It's a classic trap for pilots. So I know it sounds pretty grim, but the good news is we are not helpless. modern aviation has come up with some really effective ways to fight icing. So this next part is all about building your plan of action.
Okay, first things first, we've got to get a really important distinction straight. Anti-icing versus de-icing. They sound similar, but they're total opposites. Think of anti-icing as being proactive. It prevents ice from forming in the first place, usually by heating up surfaces like the wing's leading edge. De-icing, on the other hand, is reactive. It's for getting rid of ice after it's already formed, using things like inflatable rubber boots to literally crack it off. Knowing which one your plane has and exactly how to use it is a really big deal.
But beyond all the cool tech, it really comes down to you, the pilot. Your action plan is actually pretty simple. First, avoid. Use your weather briefing to plan a route that keeps you far away from the worst icing conditions. Second, be vigilant. You have to be constantly on the lookout for the very first signs of ice. And third, act. Know your aircraft systems and use them at the right time. So remember, avoid, watch, and act. All right, we've covered a ton of information. So now, let's do a quick knowledge check, just to bring it all home and make sure these key ideas are really locked in. Consider this our final approach. All right, first question for you. Think back to those 4 different types of icing. Which one is made by those big, supercooled droplets and sticks to the wing like it's made of concrete?
And the answer is clear ice. Yep, because it doesn't freeze the second it hits. It has time to flow and form that solid, heavy sheet that's just incredibly hard to get off. That's the one you've got to have the most respect for.
Okay, next up, a simple true or false. Anti-icing systems are used to get rid of ice that has already built up on the plane. Is that statement true or false?
That is absolutely false. Just remember, anti means against, so anti-icing prevents ice from forming. De-ice gets rid of it. Making sure you know that difference is just vital.
And for our last question, another really important safety check. Icing is only a risk when the outside air temperature is below 0 degrees Celsius. True or false? That is a dangerously false statement. Like we talked about, those engine intakes create their own little weather systems. That pressure drop can cause ice to form even when it's technically above freezing outside, especially if the air is humid. You can never, ever let a positive temperature reading make you complacent about engine icing. And that pretty much brings us to the end of our explainer. So I'll just leave you with this one final thought. Now that you know all these risks, now that you know how sneaky and dangerous even the tiniest bit of frost can be, what's the one pre-flight check you will now never, ever skip on a cold, damp morning before you even think about touching that starter? Something to think about. Fly safe.